Hello, welcome to the program. Ahead, Ten's major shareholder sells out. Could a strategic investor be waiting in the wings? The Fairfax boardroom stoush and the way the news media and advertisers made the most of the mad weather. But first, it has the #1 FM stations in Sydney, Melbourne, Adelaide and Perth in the Today network, and the #1 drive team in the country in Hamish and Andy. But it hasn't all been smooth sailing for Oz Stereo, with a headline-making radio star and the challenge of trying to grow the new Triple M breakfast shows in Sydney and Melbourne. Well, to tell us more, we're joined by Oz Stereo's CEO, Michael Anderson, and of course our co-host, James Manning, the editor and publisher of Media Week. Michael, it's great to have you here. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Friday.
Just firstly, if you could tell us, obviously you've got 3 networks I should have mentioned, because obviously you've got the digital one as well, but if you could just tell us about Today and Triple M, and I guess the difference between them and the audiences they attract.
Yeah, look, Today, I guess, has been a fairly established brand in the marketplace for quite a while now, and it's unashamedly about pop culture. It's about what's going on now, celebrity, the latest music. And so it's really targeting, I guess, an audience that's really anywhere from 18 years old up to about 40. Triple M, on the other hand, is slightly older, and it is probably 25, 30-year-old moving to about 45 to 50 years old. And the differences between the two are Triple M slightly male-oriented, Today slightly female-oriented. So quite differentiated in the marketplace.
Michael, you've faced quite a few challenges recently. You've a couple of new breakfast shows at Triple M Sydney, Triple M Melbourne. Bit of a challenge at Today FM in Sydney. We saw you in downtown Sydney one morning recently. You'd grown a bit of a beard. You joked with us you were in hiding. How have you dealt with all that?
I'll deal with the 2 brekkie shows first, if that's all right. Sure. Look, the 2 breakfast shows on Triple M in Sydney and Triple M in Melbourne, we're obviously very excited about. They've only both been on air for 2 to 3 weeks. Completely differentiated in the marketplace again, and the key here is I think we've got strategically the right approach. If you look at Eddie Maguire in Melbourne in particular, quite a hybrid format. It's not an FM format traditional, and it's not an AM format traditional. We have really gone with, which I guess is also about the future of digital radio, where you won't have those differentiators of platform. It really is just tailored for Melbourne rather than tailored to a particular genre. And the grill team in Sydney, very, very similar. It's very much designed to be connected to the Sydney community. It's not a clone of anything else that's out there. It's quite different, and early stages we believe is connecting very, very well with Sydney. So both of those have taken a while to get to this point, but we see a lot of upside from now on.
Yeah.
So you have had advertisers, interest, and what's sort of been the reaction you've had from listeners for those 2 Triple M breakfasts?
Yeah, look, we've on a number of fronts. Early research is suggesting that both shows are connecting very, very well. Advertiser feedback been very strong on both as well, and anecdotally in the marketplace we're getting very, very positive feedback on both shows. And our ears are telling us that given, again, the fact that they're only 2 to 3 weeks old, and a breakfast show can take a year to 18 months to bed in, it's a phenomenally good start for us. So,
because I think you had sort of said that it had been a struggle in recent years in those 2 markets for Triple M.
Yeah, look, I think what happened was we tended to move the shows in a similar way, create the shows in a similar way to the way we had on the Today network. So you had a Phil and Sammy against a Kyle and Jackie, against similar shows in the marketplace. So I think one of the key issues we had was that there was we were not offering real alternatives to the listeners. Now we are, and as I said, the feedback earlier has been very positive.
Interesting, just to get your thoughts, you mentioned Kyle and Jackie on. Is it almost a new start for them when they come back on October 7? This is a brand that very much linked with Oz Stereo. You built them, long-term employees.
Yeah, look, I think there's one thing that will happen is that there's going to be a lot of interest in that show when it comes back on air, and I can estimate that it's going to be micro-analysed. We have been through a lot in the last couple of months. We've done everything that we believe we need to, as has Kyle, to ensure that what we've been through is not repeated. And from our perspective, we do see the show as starting afresh and unencumbered, hopefully by the history, and able to move forward.
Yeah. There was a bit of a rating slide recently in the most recent survey as well. I mean, what do you think that was due to? Do you think it was listeners reacting against that, or because they weren't on air?
It's going to take us probably another couple of surveys before we are able to fully analyse the impact. There's no doubt there has been an impact, but it is premature for us to be able to comment exactly the depth of that impact and what's caused it, and if there has been any sort of protest against the show, then how long it will be before those people come back, if ever. So we need a few more surveys before we're able to give you a full picture on that.
I've tried to ask you before specific moves in specific surveys, but you've always said to me, look, it's a long term. You look at the trends in these radio surveys, you can never really read too much into single survey results.
No, single surveys, you've got normal movements survey by survey. So if you program that way, if you sell that way, or if you make decisions that way, you'll inevitably get into a lot of trouble. So they do have to be a trend, and that's why on this particular issue we'll see over the next couple of surveys just what turns, how it shapes up.
You mentioned selling then. How's the ad market? What's your feed on it? Is it still very short term for radio? And you hear about more inquiries, but what does that mean when you hear things like that?
Yeah, look, it is still a very short term market. We're anticipating, and really no more than anybody else is, that hopefully we will have a good lead into Christmas. If consumer sentiment stays positive, if all of the good news that's floating around now continues, we expect that there will be a reasonable Christmas. But between now and then, it is still incredibly short term with very little visibility. So,
yeah.
Just I wanted to ask you as well about Hamish and Andy. I mean, they're just getting more and more popular. They're recently, on the Jay Leno show on the Comedy Channel and just conquering America. And I mean, how crucial are they to the company, to its bottom line?
Look, you can't. They're a great show, and they're important on a whole range of fronts. They're important because they provide a great national opportunity for advertisers. They provide a fantastic halo for the Today Network. So their brand, the Today Network brand, works very well together. They drive, by listening to Hamish and Andy, you're tending to drive listening into breakfast as well. And then they're pure ratings, and their performance in Drive obviously adds to our overall ratings performance. So, great show and pretty important.
Just talk to us a little bit about digital. You were the first to jump into that space with your radar station. I think was it just last year?
Yeah,
it seems longer, but it wasn't that long ago, was it? And then, but since there hasn't been a lot of initiative, and I think at the moment you've got a station running bird noises.
We've moved on from there.
What's happening there?
Look, I think we see digital as the creative opportunity. Radio has been encumbered a lot, as we talked about before, AM, FM, certain formats, there's certainly tight approaches to the way we go about things that have developed over years. Digital radio is a way for us to play with that a little bit, to work with advertisers, to work with our listeners, to work with content, and radio is an example, Pink Radio is another example, that we couldn't do with our mainstream stations at this point in time. So it's R&D. And I think it helps spark interest in the platform, but it will be gradual in terms of its growth over the next 5 years.
Just wanted to ask you too, obviously, because you announced in July that you wouldn't be renewing your contract. I guess what was the thing that made you decide that it was time to move on, and what are you going to do next?
A whole range of different things. 20 years with the company is a long time. It's a bit of a rarity nowadays, so that's a figure that makes you stop and think. 6 years as CEO, and we're through some critical phases. We're through the expansion of licences, which was in the early 2000s. We've now launched across the digital, so there comes a point where you're able to step aside and somebody else has to take the challenge of digital and moving the company forward. And so it seemed like a natural break point. So what I'm doing next, home for a while. I think
all you've said is you won't be going on in radio.
No, I don't. I certainly I would not see working for another radio company after 20 years with Austereo as being a step forward.
Sure.
So,
Sure. You mentioned then digital. Is it, and you're doing, I think you mentioned a figure before, the incredible amount of podcasts you're doing these days. Because you do run ads at the start of those, don't you?
Yeah, we do.
So yeah, it's earning some revenue, isn't it? Or is it mainly an add-on for existing sort of analogue advertisers?
The way that we take it to market is bundled. So when you sponsor Hamish and Andy, say, as an example, you will get sponsorship of the podcasts as well. And you'll get any activity that's going online, you'll get that as well. So we tend not to sell by separate platform, we sell by the content. And that means that each distribution channel receives some income from that perspective. But you know, so every time we release our ratings now, we also talk about our UBs, our PIs, our time spent online, our podcasts, our video streaming, and they're things that we wouldn't have talked about 3 or 4 years ago. So the nature of radio is changing quite considerably.
Is that sort of new digital audience, if you like, is that younger than traditional radios, or is it getting across the spectrum?
It's across the spectrum, really. Again, any preconceptions about the fact that it would be your 10 to 17-year-olds or your 18 to 24s are more likely to is not really proving to be the case. We're seeing right across the board people accessing this content, quite often driven by the ability to access that on demand, which clearly is a factor that's here to stay. But yeah, not targeted to any specific demographic.
Okay. We're going to have to leave it there, but it's been great to have you in, Michael Anderson, CEO of Austereo. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks.
Right, we are just going to quickly check on a couple of other bits of news out of the radio space. And James, we saw 2GB re-sign as the commercial radio rights holder for the NRL this week. Yeah, they three more years they got. Michael's Triple M station also has the rights in Sydney for one game a week. They do a Monday night match. Apparently the NRL approached 2UE to see if they'd be interested in joining and putting in a tender, but they said no, look, we're doing okay on weekends without the football. So they've, yeah. And obviously we're just speaking there about Austereo's new breakfast shows in Melbourne and Sydney for Triple M, but 2UE's just started one as well. It's an interesting title. Yeah, well, they're referring to them as the Bald and the Beautiful. The Bald, of course, John Stanley and Sandy Aloisi sitting alongside him. She continues in the slot, also a former program director for the channel. Interesting to see how they go. They've given them a couple of months to see how the ratings are before they commit to a long-term deal for them in breakfast. But it could do well. All right, we'll come back to you for some news from the other sectors in just a moment. But firstly, to some news out today. The 10 Network's major shareholder, the debt-troubled CanWest, has sold its 50% stake in the network to Macquarie Capital Advisors for $680 million. Macquarie is expected to on-sell the shares by the 1st of October. Cameron Peacock from IG Markets has the details.
Some interesting news in the media space today. CanWest, the troubled Canadian media company, looks to have finally sold its 50.1% stake in 10 Network to Macquarie Capital Partners for a sum of $680 million. Now, for some time, CanWest has been struggling under a $4 billion debt burden and has been in constant negotiations with its bondholders over repayments. They were recently given a final extension through to the 30th of September, by which time they had to come up with a recapitalisation plan. Now, in March of this year, 10 shares were trading at around 61 cents a share, but have recovered with the equity markets, and that allowed Channel 10, or 10 Network rather, to raise $138 million at $1.15 a share, the proceeds of which they were going to use to pay down some of their own debt. The CanWest didn't participate in this transaction, and as a result saw its shareholding diluted from 56.6% down to the current 50.1%. Now, at yesterday's closing price of $1.36 per share, CanWest's holding in 10 was valued at about $710 million, but in selling to Macquarie Capital Partners for a sum of or for a price of $1.30, that's a 4.6% discount to the last traded share price. The successful sale brings to an end this long-running saga. 2 years ago, CanWest famously turned down a couple of private equity firms that had apparently offered $2.80 a share for the stake in 10, with CanWest holding out for a price believed to be around $3.10, a decision I'm sure that's haunted them ever since. So assuming this deal has now finally been executed, it's really going to be interesting to see how 10 Network shares trade with a much larger free float and without the burden of a 50% shareholder looking over its shoulder.
Stay with us. Coming up on Media Week, Westfield's Theatre for Brands inside its shopping centres. Welcome back. The world's biggest shopping centre owner, Westfield, has launched its large format digital advertising network. The LED screens up to 40 square metres in size are double-sided and can be interactive. The first screens are being displayed in 3 shopping centres in Brisbane, Sydney and Melbourne initially.
And all of those screens are very heavily sold out between now and Christmas. So we're really excited about the initial take-up from the advertising industry.
Westfield says clients' video messages are displayed over 16,000 times per 2-week campaign. So James, just hearing from Managing Director Stephen Lowy there, says there's been a lot of interest. What do you think?
The interesting thing about this is that Westfield are actually selling this themselves to advertisers. It's not going through a traditional out-of-home company. So I don't know if that has some implications for the sector long term. Of course, Westfield has a lot of relationships with different outdoor companies who sell, panels or at the entrances to Westfield car parks, things like that. But this time Westfield is sort of cutting out the middleman, if you like, and going straight to the advertisers with this opportunity.
Yeah, it will be interesting to watch that one. Just to the print sector, and of course we saw over the past week the chairman of Fairfax come out and say that, look, he will stand for re-election. He won't stand for re-election, rather, if he doesn't have shareholder support. James, you've obviously been following this closely. What do you make of this?
Well, it's been a confusing little boardroom brawl, hasn't it?
Yeah.
One day, Roger Corbett's looking like he'd be the new chairman, maybe not. Ron Walker says he'll go, no, maybe not. I think the secret to it is, look, Ron's very keen to see the new age building in Melbourne operating. They're going to be moving in there, I think, around November, before the end of the year. Let him stay till he can cut the ribbon on that, then I'm sure he'd be happy to go.
Okay.
It just seemed a pity to chuck him out before that's all up. But I think for Marinia Media, that could be the key to it.
Right, so there's the inside story.
Yeah.
There you go. Just staying with Fairfax and, of course, launching the new tabloid business and sports section in the Sydney Morning Herald as well this week.
We talked a little bit about this before. It's they promoted it very heavily last week, and a few people I spoke to were a little bit underwhelmed by flicking through this new tabloid section. It looked a little bit, I don't know, it just wasn't terribly exciting after the big broadsheet pages and all the hoo-ha from the launch. And I think they've still got to do a bit of work on it. There's still very long articles that they used to run on broadsheet pages, and they just look a little awkward in the so I think they'll need to punch it up a bit. Yeah, before they carry on.
All right, let's just turn to the magazines, because we had the new editor, of course, Helen McCabe at the Australian Women's Weekly, and she got a bit of a scoop for her first edition.
Yeah, she did. A story on Belinda Neal, that she wasn't going to turf out her husband, John Della Bosca, for his recent indiscretions, and well catalogued in the media. It was a story they actually did probably the best part of a month ago, and they've been able to sit on this for a whole month. So it's interesting. And the magazine too, it's carried on the tradition that Robin Foister, the previous editor, has. It's taken the magazine up market. Helen McCabe's probably continued that a bit. There's still the obligatory stories on 9 personalities, of course. Tracy Grimshaw on the cover, Katrina Roundtree's baby, lots of things like that. There's also somebody, Matt Preston, one of the MasterChef judges, he's in there too from Network 10. Whether that's, the advertisers love all that. It's a very thick issue, this new one. It's about 350 pages, plenty of ads. Whether they can buck the trend of the sales have gradually fallen over the years, whether the readers want that sort of upmarket feel remains to be seen.
And just wider to the global scene as well, we saw News Corp, Dow Jones, have to close down its Far Eastern Economic Review magazine. Yeah,
used to be sort of. People used to read it, used to break stories and things like that. You speak to people these days, they go, well, it's still around. They, it didn't have a big presence here, especially. Dow Jones not abandoning the region there. They have a Chinese language version of the Wall Street Journal online, going to launch a Japanese language edition. So, yeah, they'll still be sticking around.
All right, let's just move to what we saw in the television ratings for week 38 of the season, to the free-to-air top 10 first. Yet again, James, they're packed to the rafters in top spot, but 9 News doing very well there to make it to number 2.
Yeah, on a Sunday night. What's interesting, I think there's 3 or 4 7, they call them obdocs, observational documentaries, that have done very well for 7. The big daddy of them all, of course, Border Security, but a few other ones are filling up the part of the top 10 there.
All right, let's just come out and have a quick chat as well about other news in the free-to-air space. The Communications Minister coming out saying, look, there are no plans for a fourth licence for a fourth commercial free-to-air network.
Yeah, I don't think that comment surprises anybody. I mean, if he'd said anything different, I don't think anybody was looking for guidance from him on that issue. I think it's been dead and buried for a long time. There's going to be a plethora of new Foxtel channels. When everybody finally starts multi-channeling, there'll be 15 free-to-air digital channels. So, I don't think anybody. Is there an investor around who'd stump up the money, big money for a licence? And we'll see how this 10 sale goes. If they can find a major shareholder to take a chunk of that business, but there's just not a lot of demand out of there for high-priced, free-to-air channels. I don't think.
Let's just have a look at the Spearman experiment, something that we've talked about since it launched. What do you think its future is?
Well, it went up, was it 100,000? I can't remember, but it was a significant boost. I think it was over 100,000 viewers this week, which was definitely looking like it was dead as a dodo. I think they would have given it one more week, pulled it out of the schedule. It's probably been given an extra life now. They'll see how it goes. They would have liked it to be performing a bit better because they've got some big shows moving in next week. So new editions of NCIS, probably 10's premier international brand that they have in Australia. And they certainly don't want a dud show as a lead into that. So they'll give it a little bit more time, it looks like, but doubtful if it's a long-term consideration for them.
Australian Idol, though, did well after that time slot change.
Yeah. Partly the time slot, partly Dancing with the Stars no longer on air. It's hard to know which had the most effect there. Still, the total audience shy of 1 million viewers, which is really a cut-off, especially on a Sunday night for a program. You really want to tick over that 1 million, but the core demos are very strong for 10. The program up again, #1 in its core demos under 40, so that's good news. You do get the feeling though that this is a franchise that may be coming to the end of its life. A lot of changes this year, which we've catalogued before, and it seems to have, the viewer drop off because of that has been significant.
Just quickly looking at the huge amount of premieres too on free-to-air television. There's only 10 weeks left on the rating season.
That's right. So the networks are really going to run hard. Of course, they start to get into negotiating ad time for 2010. So any little pump up they can give to the ratings now is good news for they want to the advertising buyers going in with a headspace that this network's doing very well. So they're going to be chock full their schedules with programs they can. Flash forward, a new science fiction program starting on 7 on Monday night. We've talked before to NCIS, the new NCIS Los Angeles franchise, also starting next week. So lots of things coming through.
Just as well, getting away from the commercial networks, ABC, well, United States of Tara has such a huge following. It was good to see Toni Collette win the Emmy for her role in that as well. Yeah,
absolutely, but it's a hardcore base, and it was interesting this week the figures didn't go up after the Emmy win. Pre-Emmy it was a bit over 700,000. After the Emmy win that had dropped down under 700,000. So there was no sort of interest from curious viewers, which is a little bit surprising. But I guess the Emmy Awards really don't have a big impact on the Australian market, obviously.
All right, let's just see what you thought of the subscription ratings as well for week 38. And just bringing them up, we saw the Project Runway finale there, top spot there for Arena, America's Next Top Model as well, the very popular franchise for Fox 8, NCIS for TV1.
It's amazing that show's been repeated so many times on 10 now. And it's still third most popular show for the week. It's incredible that the fans of that just can't get enough of it.
And the Bledisloe there at #5. Just turning the page quickly, and some more wins well for Fox 8 there and Arena. Wizards of Waverley Place there, and Deadliest Catch too for Discovery.
Yeah, who would have thought a show about catching fish? And but it does fantastically well for Discovery.
Just looking as well, were there any other big Emmy winners for the subscription TV programs too?
Absolutely. I'll just look at my list here to go through a few of them. Comedy Channel got a few things. The Daily Show with Jon Stewart, of course, perennial favourite with Emmy voters, and Saturday Night Live continues. I don't know how many years that's been on. Does very well. 30 Rock, of course, won very big last year. They weren't expecting it to dominate as much this year, but it did very well. Also shown on 7, of course, but TV1 are doing good things with it at the moment. A couple of things on the W Channel, Damages, and the show Rescue Me, which Michael J. Fox had a role in this series, and he won an Emmy for that. Of course, Mad Men, so shown on SBS, but the episodes premiere on Movie Extra and that Emmy voters applaud that too.
We were just seeing there at the top spot of week 38, Project Runway, and the finale there did very well for Arena, didn't it, in the past week?
Yeah. Those big shows they make here, whether it be Next Top Model, Project Runway, the viewers really like them. And that's something that Foxtel's done very well in the last few years. It's built up its local franchises, its local production. There were lots of jokes when subscription TV started. It was just reruns of stuff you've already seen, but certainly no longer the case. They make a lot of programs for themselves. And
a very big week next week for subscription TV, with some major changes being announced by Foxtel and Austar.
Yeah, there have already been a few leaks. There'll be a download initiative. There'll be Foxtel subscribers will be able to download a lot of programming to their PCs, no charge, which is good news for people. But the only requirement is you have to be a subscriber. So it might younger people particularly used to watching video content on the laptops or in their bedrooms or something, they might be motivated to take out a sub. But we'll have some more details about that next week.
Of course, we'll be talking to Foxtel CEO Kim Williams here in the hot seat in the next program. Sure. Just finally as well, because of course everyone has been watching those amazing pictures of the wild weather and the dust storm that rolled along the eastern seaboard. And it was interesting too, wasn't it? Because the news media and the advertisers have really been making the most of the mad weather.
Yeah, well, not all the news media, but some of them, and some weren't that excited by it. The Daily Telegraph, for instance, 8-page wraparound today. They went very hard on it. Speaking to some people in the Telly this morning, they were surprised in comparison how little the Sydney Morning Herald did on it. Didn't devote the front cover to it, less than half of the front cover in fact, and they told me that the reason the Telly went so hard, they thought they'd be battling a Sydney Morning Herald with a big wraparound. And the Telly actually, when they decided to go big on it, they told their ad sales people, they rang around, they got a whole lot of advertisements, so with special creative based around, wipes and Windex sprays to get your windows clean, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, it was pretty incredible to see, wasn't it? Always make the most of it. James, it's always great to have you. And James Manning, editor and publisher of Media Week magazine. Thank you.
Thanks, Bridie.
And that is the program for this week from the team here. Thanks for your company.